In a Montana snowstorm, a retired Navy SEAL walked into a rescue shelter looking for a puppy. But at the end of a quiet hallway, an old German shepherd stood behind glass, refusing to eat. Wren knelt before him, not knowing the dog had already lost the one man he trusted. Then Marcus saw a shadow reflected behind him, shaped like a soldier from a past he had never escaped. The dog's name was Talon, and his record said he was retired. But the truth was far darker. Before the snow stopped falling, Marcus would have to face two collectors, a collapsing shelter, and the memory of the man who once saved his life. Tell us where you're watching from, share your thoughts after the story, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers. Marcus Wren lived outside Missoula in a cabin that had never quite learned how to become a home. It sat at the edge of a pine break where the land began to climb, a square-shouldered thing of dark logs and narrow windows, half hidden by winter, even before winter properly arrived. In daylight, smoke rose from its chimney in a thin gray ribbon. At night, only one lamp burned behind the kitchen window, yellow and watchful, like the eye of an old animal that had forgotten how to sleep. Inside, everything had its place. Firewood stacked by size beside the iron stove. Boots lined toe-out near the door. A flashlight in the drawer nearest the sink, another by the bed, another in the truck. The back door locked twice. The front door locked once, checked, then locked again because Marcus never trusted the first memory of his hand. Before sundown, he walked the rooms. Kitchen window, locked. Mudroom window, locked. Bedroom window, locked. Hallway window, the one facing the trees, locked. He did not call it a ritual. Rituals belonged to churches, funerals, and men who believed repetition could please the gods. Marcus did it because a body trained for danger did not retire just because paperwork said so. At 47, Marcus was still built like someone meant to carry weight through bad weather. Tall, broad through the shoulders, hard in the arms without the showy vanity of a gym mirror. His olive-drab combat shirt fit close through the chest, its camouflage sleeves worn soft at the elbows, faint dark bands circling the biceps. On his right forearm, half hidden when he pulled his sleeves down, a faded Navy SEAL tattoo had blurred at the edges with time, as if even ink grew tired of remembering. His hair was brown with ash gray at the temples, a little longer than regulation would have allowed, brushed back by habit and wind. A 2-day beard shadowed his jaw. His face had once been handsome in the easy way people noticed. Now it was handsome like a mountain pass after a storm, cut, weathered, difficult, and not asking to be admired. The first snowstorm of the season came in hard from the west. By late afternoon, the pines around the cabin had vanished into white. Snow climbed the porch steps. The wind pressed itself against the windows and searched for a way in. Each time it found a gap and whistled through the old wood, Marcus's right hand twitched toward the side of the chair where no weapon waited anymore. He hated that part, not the memory itself. Memory was a country he knew too well. He hated the small betrayals, the flinch at a passing siren in town, the way his breath shortened when a truck backfired, the way storms could carry him from Montana to Helmand without asking permission. One moment there was snow tapping the glass. The next, there was dust in his teeth, heat trapped inside body armor, a radio voice breaking apart in static. 2 men had not come home from that day. Marcus had. Some people treated survival like a medal. Marcus had learned it could also be a debt, and debt had a way of sitting across from a man at dinner, silent and patient, waiting to be paid. His phone buzzed on the kitchen table. He looked at it for 3 seconds before picking it up. Caleb. His son had inherited his mother's stubbornness and Marcus's poor timing, which made him both persistent and inconvenient. Caleb Wren lived in Spokane, worked long hours, and called more often than Marcus answered. He was old enough to stop needing his father and kind enough not to stop trying. Marcus tapped the screen. "Yeah." "Good evening to you too," Caleb said. Very warm, very human. I almost felt hugged. Marcus stared out at the snow. Roads are bad. I didn't ask about the roads. You were going to. I was going to ask if you ate. Marcus glanced at the pot on the stove. Soup, technically. Beans, broth, and a level of seasoning that would make a chef resign from civilization. I'm working on it. That means no. It means I'm negotiating with it. Dad? There it was, the word that still did something strange in Marcus's chest, small as a match, heavy as a verdict. Caleb lowered his voice. I called Silver Pines. Marcus shut his eyes. You said you might go this week, Caleb continued. They've got lab pups coming through. Not today, maybe, with the storm, but soon. You could meet them. I know what I said. A dog would be good for you. A dentist says flossing is good for me, too. Doesn't make it a life-changing prophecy. I'm serious. So am I. No, you're defensive. There's a difference. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. Caleb had gotten better at standing his ground over the years. There had been a time when Marcus's silence could clear a room. His son had somehow grown immune to it, or maybe love had made him foolish enough to keep walking back in. Caleb said, I'm not saying you're lonely. Smart. I'm saying a dog would make sure you open the door every morning, walk a little, eat at a normal time because someone with fur will sit there judging your soup like a tiny magistrate. Marcus looked at the pot again. No dog deserves this soup. See? You're already thinking about its welfare. I'm thinking about animal cruelty charges. Caleb laughed. The sound traveled through the phone and filled the cabin for half a second, brighter than the lamp, warmer than the stove. Marcus hated how much he missed it after it faded. I'll go, Marcus said finally. The line went quiet. Caleb did not pounce. He had learned not to celebrate too quickly around his father, the way one did not clap beside a skittish horse. Yeah? He asked. Storm clears, I'll go. Storm may get worse tomorrow. Marcus looked at the window. Snow was already erasing the tire tracks beside the cabin. Beyond the porch light, the world had become a blank page. He heard himself say, Then I'll go before it does. Silver Pines Rescue sat 12 miles outside town, tucked between a county road and a long slope of timber. Marcus drove there in his old truck with chains biting at the snow, windshield wipers fighting a losing war against the white. The heater groaned. The radio stayed off. He passed fields buried smooth under stormlight, fences reduced to dark stitches, mailboxes wearing pointed caps of snow. The world had softened at the edges, but Marcus knew better than to trust softness. Snow could hide ditches, ice, broken branches, things waiting with teeth. By the time he turned into the rescue's long driveway, dusk had thickened into a blue-gray blur. A wooden sign swung in the wind. Silver Pines Animal Rescue. Someone had strung white lights along the eaves of the main building, and the bulbs glowed through the snow like tired stars. Warm light spilled from the front windows. Behind the glass, shapes moved, people, dogs, the swing of a leash, the tilt of a head. Marcus parked close to the entrance, sat with both hands on the wheel, and did not get out. The engine ticked. The storm breathed around the truck. He told himself this was ridiculous. He had walked into buildings with worse odds. He had crossed ground where every step could become a final answer. Yet a rescue shelter full of barking dogs and well-meaning people had him sitting in a parking lot, like a man waiting outside a courtroom. His phone buzzed, a text from Caleb. Don't overthink it. Just meet the dog. Marcus looked toward the building. Which one? He muttered. He stepped out before he could change his mind. The wind hit him sideways. Snow caught in his hair, clung to the shoulders of his parka, melted against the warm fabric of his collar. He moved with his head slightly down, boots steady, one hand near his coat pocket, but not inside it. Old habits walked beside him like ghosts, polite enough not to speak. The shelter smelled of pine cleaner, wet fur, coffee, and the faint metallic tang of kennels scrubbed often. A bell over the door gave a soft, cheerful ring that made Marcus's shoulders tighten. A woman looked up from behind the front desk. She was in her 30s, with dark chestnut hair tied low at the back of her neck and a slate-blue hoodie beneath a brown, insulated vest marked with the Silver Pines logo. A heavy ring of keys hung at her hip. Her face was calm, not soft exactly, but steady in the way of someone used to frightened animals and frightened people pretending not to be. "Marcus Wren?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm Odette Hale. We spoke on the phone." Her handshake was firm, brief, and practical. No squeezing, no performance. "Roads are getting ugly," she said. "They usually do." That earned him a small look, not quite amusement, not quite assessment. "You came about the lab litter." "That was the rumor." "They're not here yet. Transport got delayed near Helena." She glanced toward the hallway behind her. A bark rose somewhere in the building, then another, then a chorus that faded as quickly as it began. "But since you made the drive, there's someone I'd like you to see." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm not here for a project." "I know." "I mean it." "I believe you." That should have ended it. Instead, Odette looked past him toward the storm-black window, then back to his face. "He isn't available for adoption right now," she said. "And I'm not asking you to take him. I'm asking if you'd sit near his kennel for a few minutes." Marcus stared at her. "A few minutes?" "Yes." "With a dog." "With a German shepherd." He gave a dry breath that was almost a laugh. "I came here for a Labrador puppy. You're offering me a retired soldier in fur." Odette's mouth twitched. "That's not the official classification." "It should be." Her expression softened, but only a little. "His name is Talon. He lost his owner 6 days ago. He's refusing most food. Our vet thinks it's stress and grief. He doesn't respond well to people crowding him." "Then don't crowd him." "We aren't." "Good." But when you came in, he stood up. The building seemed to settle around that sentence. Marcus looked down the hallway. He had heard many kinds of silence in his life. This one had weight. Not empty, not peaceful. Waiting? Odette did not push. That made it harder to refuse. 5 minutes, Marcus said. 5 minutes. She led him past the front rooms where younger dogs shifted in clean kennels and watched him with bright, hopeful confusion. A spotted mix pressed a toy against the bars. A gray-muzzled hound sighed like a retired judge. Somewhere, a small terrier barked with the furious conviction of a creature no larger than a winter boot. Marcus kept walking. The shelter grew quieter near the back. They passed a side office where a woman in teal scrubs stood reading a chart under a desk lamp. She was in her early 40s, with short ash-blonde hair tucked behind one ear and thin-framed glasses sliding down her nose. She looked up as they passed. "Naomi," Odette said softly, "this is Marcus Wren." The vet's gaze flicked to him, not invasive, just precise. The kind of look that noticed how a man held his shoulders and how close his hand stayed to an exit. "Dr. Naomi Kessler," she said. "Don't try to touch him. Don't stare directly. Slow breathing helps." Marcus nodded once. "Works on people, too." Naomi gave a tired half-smile. "Some of them." Odette continued down the hall. At the far end was a quarantine room separated by a large pane of thick glass. The overhead lights had been dimmed. A wool blanket lay folded in one corner. A stainless steel bowl sat untouched near the door. Another bowl, water, had been moved slightly, as if approached and abandoned more than once. And there stood Talon. He was larger than Marcus expected, though thinner than he should have been. A male German shepherd, black and tan, with a dark saddle marking across his back that leaned unevenly to the left. His coat was roughened by stress, fluffed along the neck, the gold of his chest dulled but still visible beneath the dim light. One ear stood sharp. The other had a small notch along the edge, a clean old imperfection that made him look less like a poster of a working dog and more like a veteran of weather. His eyes were deep brown, nearly amber at the edges. He did not bark. He did not retreat. He stood close to the glass and watched Marcus as if reading a language written under his skin. Marcus felt the old training rise in him, not command, not dominance, but awareness. Weight distribution, ears forward, tail low but not tucked, mouth closed, pupils steady, a dog holding position, not offering trust, not offering threat. A sentry. Odette spoke quietly behind him. His owner was Elias Voss, former military, lived alone up near Lolo Creek. He passed during the storm last week. We brought Talon in after deputies found him beside the body. Marcus turned his head slightly, just enough to show he was listening. He's eaten a few bites when the room is dark, Odette continued. Drinks some, but not enough. Naomi says forcing it will make things worse. Marcus understood that too well. There were doors a person could not be dragged through, not without losing part of him in the frame. He lowered himself slowly to one knee. His joints did not love the choice. His right knee gave the faint complaint of old cold-weather miles and younger stupidity. He rested one hand lightly on his thigh. The other stayed open, empty, visible. Talon's gaze followed every movement. Marcus did not say the dog's name. Names were invitations, sometimes demands. He had no right to either. Instead, he breathed in for 4 counts, out for 6. Again. The storm struck the outer wall in a long gust, and somewhere behind him the hanging keys at Odette's hip gave a tiny metallic clink. Talon's ears flicked. Marcus's fingers tightened once against his knee, then released. For a moment, man and dog were joined by the same small betrayal. Marcus looked at the floor just below the glass, not directly into Talon's eyes. "Yeah," he murmured, so low Odette barely heard it. "I know." Talon shifted his weight. 1 step, only 1. But the space between them changed. On the glass, Marcus saw his own reflection kneeling in the dim hall, broad shoulders dusted with melting snow, ash-brown hair, face cut by lines he did not remember earning one at a time. Behind that reflection hung an old field jacket on a peg near the wall. He had not noticed it before. The jacket was faded green, patched at one shoulder, its old insignia nearly worn into shadow. In the glass, the jacket became a figure standing behind him. For one breath, Marcus did not see cloth. He saw a man, not clearly, never clearly. The dead rarely returned with manners enough to show their faces. They came as posture, weight, absence. They came in the shape of a shoulder behind yours, a voice caught in static, a hand that pushed you down when the world tore open. Marcus's throat tightened. The hallway vanished at the edges. The snow outside became dust. The soft hum of shelter lights became radio hiss. He could almost hear someone shouting his name through heat and chaos. Then Talon moved again. The German shepherd lowered his head until his nose hovered close to the glass, directly opposite Marcus's open hand. Not touching, not trusting, but nearer. Marcus anchored himself to that, to the dog's breath faintly fogging the inside of the pane, to the smell of pine cleaner and wet fur, to Odette standing a few steps behind him, saying nothing, to Montana snow pressing against the walls instead of desert wind. He swallowed. The reflection of the jacket remained behind him, but it became cloth again, mostly. Odette's voice came softly. "You don't have to stay." Marcus kept his eyes on the place where Talon's nose nearly met his hand through the glass. "I said 5 minutes. It's been 12. That time, the laugh escaped him, quiet, rusted. real enough to surprise him. Talon's ears tipped forward at the sound. Marcus looked at him then, not hard, not challenging, just enough. The dog's amber-brown eyes held his. There was no miracle in it, no music from heaven, no sudden healing handed down like a blessing from a generous God. Only a man who had come looking for something easy, and a dog who had no interest in being easy. Only a pane of glass between two creatures trained to endure, both standing guard over doors no one else could see. Marcus had driven through a storm to meet a puppy. Instead, he knelt before a German shepherd who looked at him as if they had both been assigned the same watch in the same white night by someone neither of them was ready to forgive. Marcus stayed longer than 5 minutes. By the time he stood, the cold had climbed through his right knee and settled there like an old complaint. Talon hadn't moved much after that single step toward the glass. He remained near the pane, head level, ears alert, watching Marcus with the patience of a sentry who had decided not to sound the alarm yet. Odette did not rush him. That earned her more trust than any soft speech could have. People who worked with broken things, dogs, men, promises, usually made one of two mistakes. They either crowded too close, hungry to be useful, or stood too far away, afraid to be responsible. Odette seemed to know the thin country between. Marcus zipped his parka halfway and looked once more toward the quarantine room. "I'm not adopting him," he said. "I didn't ask you to. I came here for a Labrador puppy. I remember. Something small, simple, something that trips over its own ears and doesn't look at me like it's evaluating my moral failures." Odette's laugh slipped out before she could stop it. Not loud, not careless, just warm enough to thaw the hallway by 1 degree. "Talon does have a judgmental face," she admitted. "He has the face of a retired commanding officer trapped in fur." "That's also not the official classification." "It should be." The corner of her mouth stayed lifted for a moment. Then the sound of the wind pushed against the building and the lights flickered once overhead. The storm had thickened outside. Snow tapped the high windows with a dry, needling sound. Odette folded her arms against the chill seeping through the back hall. "You said you've been around working dogs." Marcus looked at her. "I read body language, Mr. Wren. You knew not to stare, you knew not to reach, and you lowered yourself slowly enough that he didn't feel cornered. Doesn't mean I'm the right man." "No," she said. "It just means you did one right thing." That should not have landed as heavily as it did. Marcus looked away. One right thing, a small phrase, plain as a nail, yet it struck somewhere under his ribs, where the old accounting never balanced. He had spent years measuring himself by the things he had failed to prevent. The idea that a few quiet minutes on a cold floor could count for anything felt almost insulting. And yet Talon had stepped closer. Odette watched him carefully, not like a woman trying to win an argument, but like someone holding a door open while pretending not to notice whether he walked through it. "He hasn't eaten a full meal since Elias died," she said. "Naomi thinks a calm presence might help. Not touch, not bonding, just presence." Presence is a fancy word for sitting on the floor. Sometimes sitting on the floor is all we have. Marcus almost answered. Something sharp, probably. Something that would push her back into safe distance. Instead, a clink sounded behind them. Naomi Kessler had come down the hall carrying a shallow metal dish in one hand and a long-handled spoon in the other. Her teal scrubs were partly hidden beneath a charcoal fleece jacket, and a penlight stuck out of her chest pocket beside 2 marker pens and a folded chart. Her glasses sat low on her nose, which gave her the look of a woman permanently disappointed by the survival instincts of both animals and people. "Before anyone writes poetry about presence," Naomi said, "he still needs calories." Marcus glanced at the spoon. "That for him or me?" "For him, though I've met men with worse table manners." Odette's mouth twitched again. Naomi stepped toward the quarantine room but stopped well outside the glass. He's not refusing everything. That matters. He drinks some, takes small pieces when the room is dark. He's not in immediate danger, but if this continues, we'll have to consider more support. Support? Marcus repeated. Naomi gave him a dry look. I'm avoiding dramatic words because they make people do dramatic things. Good policy. I try. She held out the dish. Soft food, warmed slightly, strong smell, easy texture. You sit outside the kennel door, not in front of it. Spoon goes near the bottom gap, not through it. Don't offer your fingers. Don't use a sweet voice unless you want him to lose respect for both of us. Marcus took the dish and spoon. The food smelled like chicken, broth, and something medicinal. Not pleasant exactly, but honest. Talon watched through the glass. Marcus lowered himself to the floor outside the kennel door this time, not directly in front of the pane. His knee disliked the idea and informed him with great seriousness. He ignored it. The floor was cold enough to bite through fabric. He set the dish down beside his boot, rested the spoon across it, and waited. Talon did not come. A young dog in another room barked twice, high and hopeful. A staff member murmured somewhere near the lobby. The heater kicked on with a low groan. Above it all, the storm kept drawing its white claws along the roof. Marcus scooped a small amount onto the spoon and placed it near the gap at the bottom of the kennel door. Not through, not too close. Just near enough that the smell could cross first. No one's forcing you, he said. His voice was low, even, without decoration. Talon's ears moved. Marcus kept his gaze on the spoon. Just breathe first. For a while, that was all that happened. A man on a cold floor, a dog behind a door, two watchers pretending not to watch. Marcus remembered other dogs, not as pets, not as comfort, but as disciplined shapes moving through dust and floodlight. He remembered the muted sound of paws on concrete, the short hand signals, the handler's trust built in inches and confirmed in silence. He remembered envying that kind of bond. It seemed cleaner than human loyalty. A dog did not dress fear as pride or grief as anger. A dog knew when a room changed. After Helmand, he had avoided dogs like Talon, not because he disliked them, because they remembered too honestly. Talon shifted, one paw forward, then another, his head lowered. He sniffed the air above the spoon, but did not touch it. Marcus breathed slowly. In for 4, out for 6. He felt Odette and Naomi somewhere behind him, careful not to make hope too loud. Talon's nose dipped. A small pink tongue touched the edge of the food. Once, then again. He did not eat the spoonful. Not really. He only tasted it, barely enough to count if anyone had been counting with their heart instead of a chart. Behind Marcus, Naomi exhaled. Odette said nothing. Marcus looked at the spoon and allowed himself the smallest nod. Not victory, not even progress. A signal, maybe. A hairline crack in a frozen lake. Talon lifted his head and stared at Marcus as if annoyed that the man had witnessed weakness. "Don't look at me," Marcus murmured. "I've eaten worse things out of worse containers." Naomi's voice came from the doorway. "That is not veterinary encouragement, but I'll allow it." Talon did not take another lick, but he stayed near the door. That was something. In a shelter, something was often the royal cousin of everything. The front bell rang. Its cheerful chime sliced through the quiet. Talon's head snapped toward the hallway. Marcus saw the change before anyone spoke. The dog did not simply startle. His entire body rearranged around a memory. Weight back, neck tight, tail low, mouth closed. No barking, no panic. A defensive stillness, precise and terrible. Odette stepped away from the quarantine area. Naomi's expression sharpened. A man's voice rolled in from the lobby, roughened by cold and impatience. "Hello?" Anybody running this place?" Marcus rose from the floor slowly. Talon's eyes stayed fixed past him. Odette walked toward the front, and Marcus followed at enough distance to make it look accidental. The man standing near the desk had brought the storm in with him. Snow clung to the shoulders of his brown canvas jacket and melted into dark patches. He was broad, thick through the middle, with a heavy jaw, chapped cheeks, and gray-brown stubble that looked less like a beard than a surrender. A battered knit cap sat low over thinning hair. His gloves were old leather, cracked at the knuckles. He smelled faintly of tobacco, gasoline, and wet wool. He stamped his boots on the mat as if the building had offended him by being dry. "Odette Hale?" he asked. "That's right." "Garrett Fenn?" He pulled one glove off with his teeth and extended a hand. Odette shook it briefly. Marcus noticed she did not let him hold on long. Garrett's eyes moved to Marcus, a quick measuring glance. Shoulders, hands, face, tattoo partly visible where the sleeve of Marcus's combat shirt had ridden up. "You staff?" Garrett asked. "No." "Then I guess this isn't your business." Marcus did not answer. Silence, when used properly, made some men rush to fill it with mistakes. Garrett turned back to Odette. "I'm here for Elias Voss's dog." Odette's posture changed by a fraction, not fear, readiness. "We spoke by phone," she said. "Talon is still under evaluation." "He's not yours to evaluate." "He was surrendered into county care after Mr. Voss passed. We're required to confirm legal placement." Garrett gave a short laugh. "Legal placement? Lady, I shoveled that man's porch for 3 winters, fixed his generator twice, drove meds up when nobody else wanted to touch that road. Elias told me clear as daylight, if anything happened, I was to keep the dog." He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded plastic sleeve. Inside were receipts, a few photos, and a handwritten note protected from the snow. Odette accepted it and laid the papers on the desk. Marcus stayed where he was. Garrett had not asked how Talon was, not whether he had eaten, not whether he had slept, not whether he had looked for Elias at the door. He only looked toward the hallway. "I can take him now," Garrett said. "Roads are bad, and they'll be worse in an hour." Odette studied the note. "This isn't witnessed." "It's Elias's handwriting." "We'll verify that." "You calling me a liar?" "I'm saying we verify documents." Garrett's mouth tightened. "You people always make simple things complicated." Naomi had come up behind Marcus, dish still in her hand. Her gaze dropped to Garrett's other hand. Marcus followed it. A leash hung there, looped tight. Not an ordinary flat lead. A slip lead, stiff and narrow, the kind a handler might use in certain controlled situations, but not the kind Marcus would bring for a grieving, defensive dog who had just lost the only person it trusted. Garrett saw Marcus looking. "What?" he said. "Dog needs a leash." Marcus's voice was flat. "That dog needs space." Garrett turned fully now. "And you are?" "A man standing in a hallway." "Cute." "I wasn't trying to be." For a second, the shelter seemed to hold its breath. Odette stepped between the 2 lines of sight, not physically blocking, just placing authority back where it belonged. "Mr. Fenn," she said, "Talon isn't being released today. We need to confirm the note, review his health, and complete the county process." Garrett's face flushed darker. "Elias wanted me to have that dog." "Then the paperwork should support that." "It does?" "Not yet." Outside, wind slapped snow against the front windows. A small dog barked from the side room, then went quiet, as if even it understood timing. Garrett leaned closer to the desk. His voice dropped. "You don't want responsibility for someone else's property." The word arrived soft. Property. Marcus saw Odette hear it, saw Naomi's jaw tighten. From the back hall came a sound, low, contained, not a bark, a growl. It traveled along the floorboards like distant thunder under buried stone. Garrett froze. Marcus turned his head slowly. Talon stood at the end of the quarantine hall behind the glass, visible through the inner doorway. His body was aligned toward the lobby, head low, ears forward, eyes fixed on Garrett. He had not thrown himself at the door. He had not lost control. That would have been easier to dismiss. This was worse. This was recognition. Garrett forced a laugh. He's always been dramatic. Marcus watched Talon's posture. No, he said. He's being specific. Garrett looked at him. You some kind of dog whisperer? No. Then maybe keep your opinions tied up. Marcus did not move. Odette slid the papers back into the plastic sleeve. We'll contact you when we've reviewed everything. Garrett's gloved thumb rubbed along the edge of the sleeve before he snatched it back. A small motion. Nervous, angry, practiced. I helped that old man when nobody else did, he said. Remember that. I will, Odette answered. And remember, this shelter shouldn't make enemies over a dog. Naomi's voice cut in, cool as clean steel. A grieving dog with incomplete records and a medical hold. Garrett's eyes narrowed at her, then shifted again toward Marcus. For one moment, something like calculation passed through his face. He was trying to decide what kind of man Marcus was and whether he was worth fearing. Marcus saved him the trouble by giving him nothing. Garrett shoved the papers into his jacket. Fine, verify, but don't drag your feet. He turned toward the door, then paused and looked back down the hall. Come on, Talon, he called. Too loud, too familiar, too late. You remember me? The growl deepened, not louder, deeper. Garrett's smile hardened into something brittle. He opened the door and stepped out into the storm. The cheerful bell rang behind him as if mocking everyone. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Naomi muttered, I dislike him medically. Odette let out a breath. That's not a category. It should be. Marcus looked down the hall. Talon still stood behind the glass. Snowlight and shelter light divided his face, amber eyes steady, body rigid with a purpose that had not ended when Garrett walked away. Marcus returned to the quarantine door. He did not kneel this time. He stood where Talon could see all of him. No sudden movements, no comfort performed for an audience. Yeah, he said quietly. I heard it too. Talon lifted one front paw and set it down against the floor. A single tap. Small, deliberate. It sounded like a knuckle on a locked door. Marcus felt the sound travel through him and settle somewhere he did not have a name for. A story was behind that door, not the kind men like to tell over coffee, polishing themselves into heroes. Something uglier, quieter, something with paperwork and weather and a dog who had learned not to trust the wrong hand. Odette came up beside him but did not stand too close. I'm sorry, she said. For what? You came here to meet a puppy. Marcus looked through the glass at Talon. The dog looked back, stern and tired, and still guarding a dead man's last order. I still might, Marcus said. Meet the puppy. He almost smiled. Learned a long time ago not to make decisions in a storm. Odette nodded. That's probably wise. It's usually just cowardice dressed nicer. She turned toward him then. I don't think that's what this is. Marcus had no answer for that. He left Silver Pines after Naomi logged Talon's small intake, and Odette promised to call if anything changed. The storm had worsened. Snow swept across the parking lot in pale sheets, erasing footprints almost as soon as they were made. Marcus reached his truck and looked back once. Through the front windows, he could see Odette at the desk, head bent over Garrett's papers. At the far end of the building, too distant to see clearly, the quarantine hall glowed dim and gold. Marcus drove home with the heater roaring and both hands on the wheel. The road was nearly empty. Pines leaned under snow. Fence posts flashed and vanished. The truck's headlights made a tunnel through the storm, and for once Marcus did not think first of Helmond. He thought of a spoon, one careful lick, a slip lead in Garrett Fenn's hand, a dog refusing to leave his post. At home the cabin was dark except for the porch light he had left burning. Marcus checked the windows. Kitchen, mudroom, bedroom, hall. He locked the doors. Twice. Then he warmed the soup and stood over it until it steamed. His phone lit on the table. Caleb. Dad, just tell me you're still eating. Marcus looked at the message for a long time. His thumb hovered above the screen. He could have typed yes. He could have lied. He could have said roads were bad, soup was worse, shelter was fine, no dog yet. Instead, he set the phone down without answering. He carried the bowl to the table, sat, and found he was no longer hungry. Outside, snow fell through the porch light in endless white fragments. Inside, the cabin held its breath around him. On his knee, Marcus still felt the cold of the shelter floor. In his ears, he still heard Talon's paw tap once against the kennel floor, not begging, not pleading, simply knocking from the other side of a locked story. A dog in a cage did not need a savior, Marcus thought. Not yet. What Talon needed was someone willing to understand why he would not abandon his watch. Marcus looked toward the dark window. For the first time in years, the thing keeping him awake was not only the war behind him. It was the dog waiting in the storm ahead. Marcus returned to Silver Pines the next morning with a paper bag of soft dog food, 2 black coffees, and the expression of a man who had spent the drive rehearsing the lie that he was only stopping by. The storm had not left Montana. It had merely changed its posture. The wind no longer struck the truck in hard sideways blows. Instead, snow fell steadily, thick and patient, filling the ditches, rounding the fence posts, softening the world into something that looked merciful from a distance. Marcus knew better. Winter did not forgive. It only covered evidence until spring. He parked near the front entrance and sat for a moment with the engine running. The shelter glowed through the snow, warmer than his cabin had ever looked from the outside. Dogs barked somewhere beyond the walls, not wildly, just in the restless morning way of creatures who believed breakfast was both a right and a national emergency. Marcus looked at the paper bag on the passenger seat. "This is not commitment," he told it. The bag wisely did not argue. Inside Silver Pines, the air smelled of wet boots, disinfectant, coffee, and dog fur. Someone had hung extra towels over a railing near the lobby. A small whiteboard listed names, feeding times, medications, and notes written in several kinds of handwriting. At the bottom, in red marker, someone had added, "Please stop using the good towels for mud paws. This means you, Miles." As if summoned by accusation, a man in his early 30s stepped out of a side room carrying a tower of folded towels so high he had to peer around it. He was tall and narrow, with curly brown hair escaping from under a red knit cap and the slightly haunted eyes of a person who had already been corrected twice before breakfast. He saw Marcus and froze. Then he leaned toward Odette, who stood behind the desk, sorting intake forms, and whispered with the delicacy of a dropped saucepan, "The freezer seal is back." Odette closed her eyes for half a second. Marcus turned his head slowly. The young man straightened so fast the towel stack wobbled. "I said," he announced to no one in particular, "the free, sealant is cracked. On the back door, weather issue, building maintenance, very normal." 2 towels slid off the top and landed at his feet. Marcus stared at him. Miles bent to pick them up and nearly lost the rest. Odette pressed her lips together, clearly fighting a smile. "Marcus, this is Miles Arlen. He works here and occasionally survives doing so." Miles managed to reclaim the towels. "I'm better with animals." "That's not a high bar," Odette said. "No," Miles admitted, "but it comforts me." Marcus set 1 coffee on the front desk. Black. Odette looked surprised. "You looked like you needed it yesterday," he said. "I looked like that before yesterday?" "Then it's preventive medicine." Miles glanced at the second cup in Marcus's hand. "Is that also preventive medicine?" "No." Understood. Asking was brave. Regretting it was instant. For reasons Marcus did not trust, the corner of his mouth tried to move. He stopped it before it became anything too friendly. Odette noticed anyway. She lifted the coffee. Talon's awake. The hallway to quarantine felt different in daylight, though the storm still pressed pale light through the high windows. There were more sounds now, a mop bucket rolling, a terrier protesting the tyranny of confinement, Naomi's voice somewhere ahead instructing someone not to put a thermometer anywhere optimism cannot explain. Talon stood near the back of his kennel, not close to the glass this time. He watched Marcus enter with the grave disappointment of a judge who had expected better weather. The German shepherd looked tired, not defeated. Never that. His black and tan coat remained roughened along the neck, and the small notch in his right ear gave his stillness a hard-earned dignity. The water bowl had been moved during the night. The food dish had not. Dr. Naomi Kessler came out of the side exam room carrying a clipboard and the permanent exhaustion of a woman at war with both paperwork and biology. "You came back," she said. "Apparently." "That's a diagnosis in some circles. I brought food." "For him or for everyone?" Marcus raised the paper bag. Naomi inspected it. "Acceptable, not magical, but acceptable." "I left the magic at home." "Good. Magic has terrible dosing instructions." Odette leaned against the wall, coffee in both hands. "He took a little more water after you left." Marcus looked at Talon. "Good." "And he slept for almost 20 minutes, Naomi added. "Not deeply, but he lay down. That's something." Marcus knew that sentence. That's something. It was the small currency of the wounded. A spoonful. A nap. A phone call answered. A door opened without counting every hinge. He lowered himself to the floor outside the kennel, not as slowly as the first day, but not carelessly either. Talon tracked him with steady eyes. Marcus did not reach for the dog, did not say his name, did not try to wrap the moment in sentiment. He opened the container Naomi gave him, scooped a small amount of warmed food with the long spoon, and placed it near the bottom gap. "No ceremony," Marcus said quietly. "Just breakfast." Talon stared at the spoon. Miles had followed at a distance, pretending to rearrange towels on a shelf that did not need rearranging. Odette gave him a look. Miles froze with one towel in each hand and silently mouthed, "Sorry." Marcus ignored them. Talon stepped closer. One paw. Pause. Another paw. The dog lowered his head, sniffed once, then took a small lick. This time he did not pull away immediately. He tasted again. Not enough for Naomi's standards, judging by her expression, but enough that Odette's shoulders eased. Marcus kept his breathing even. "There you go," he murmured. "No medals? No speeches?" Talon's eyes flicked to him, stern and amber brown. "Fine," Marcus said. "One speech, very short. You're doing better than my soup?" Naomi wrote something on the chart. "I'll note that as clinically significant." Odette smiled into her coffee. Talon took another small taste. In the corner of the hall, Miles whispered, "I'm not crying. It's disinfectant." "No one asked," Naomi said. "That's why I clarified." For the first time since entering Silver Pines, Marcus felt the building not as a place of abandonment, but as a strange little ship in a white sea, leaky in spots, overworked, full of noise, stubbornly afloat. Its crew was odd. Its captain drank coffee like a vow. Its doctor used sarcasm as a scalpel. Its deckhand could not whisper. And behind glass a German shepherd stood like a wounded guardian, deciding whether the ship deserved his trust. Talon did not eat much more, but he stayed near the door after the spoon was lowered. Naomi nodded once. "Enough for now. We stop before he feels trapped by success." Marcus looked up. "That's a thing? In animals? Yes, in humans? Constantly." Odette's eyes moved briefly to Marcus, then away. Kindness, he had learned, could be rude if it stared too long. They returned to the front office, where the paper heat of old forms replaced the warm smell of dog food. Odette brought out a clipboard for temporary volunteer access. Liability forms, contact information, emergency procedures, boundaries around medical holds. Marcus took the pen. The first few lines were easy. Name, Marcus Wren. Address, phone number, emergency contact. He paused there. Caleb's name sat in his mind like a porch light he had not yet decided to approach. After a moment, he wrote it down. Odette watched the pen move across the paper. Her expression changed so slightly that a less watchful man might have missed it. But Marcus had spent much of his life reading the moment before a room changed. Her hand stilled over the file she had been holding. "Wren," she said. Marcus looked up. The office sounds continued around them, printer humming, dog tags clinking, Miles somewhere apologizing to a bucket. Yet the space between Marcus and Odette seemed suddenly sealed under glass. "What about it?" he asked. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the file. "Were you in Helmand?" The pen stopped in Marcus's hand. A name could be a key. A place could be a trapdoor. Helmand did not enter a room politely. It came with heat, dust, broken radio calls, the taste of metal and sand, the heavy silence after a voice stopped answering. Marcus had spent years teaching himself that Montana was Montana, that snow was snow, that the past could not cross state lines unless he opened the door. But Odette had said the word, and some doors did not ask permission. He set the pen down carefully. "Why?" he asked. Odette's face had gone pale beneath its workday composure. She did not look afraid. That would have been easier. She looked like someone approaching a grave she had only seen in photographs. "My father was Evan Hale." Marcus did not move. The name passed through him without sound. Evan Hale. Not a memory first. A force. A shoulder slamming into his chest. A hand closing around his vest. A shout, rough and furious, cutting through chaos. "Move. Wren, move." Then wait. Then heat. Then the long, terrible fact that Marcus had obeyed without knowing he had been saved. The room blurred at the edges. Odette's voice came from far away. "He served with you." Marcus stared at the desk, the clipboard, his handwriting, Caleb's name, the cheap blue pen lying across the line for signature. He could see, absurdly, a coffee stain shaped like a crescent moon near the corner of the desk. He fixed his eyes on it, because if he looked at Odette, he might see Evan in the angle of her face, and he did not know if he could survive the kindness of that resemblance. "He did," Marcus said. His voice was not the one he expected. It was smaller, worn down. Odette swallowed. "I wasn't trying to ambush you." "You didn't. I saw your name. Elias had written it down. I just—" She stopped, searching for a sentence that would not break in her hands. "I needed to know." Marcus nodded once. Need was a word he understood even when he disliked it. Miles appeared in the office doorway, still holding towels, sensed the air, and retreated with the silent terror of a deer hearing thunder. Naomi, wiser, stayed out of sight. Odette opened a drawer and removed an old manila envelope, bound with a rubber band. The envelope was worn soft at the corners, as if it had been handled many times, but opened carefully. On the front, in shaky handwriting, was written, "Hale, Voss, Talon. Keep dry." Marcus stared at the name. "Elias sent this to me 3 months ago," Odette said. "Before he died. Not here. To my apartment. I didn't know him well. Not really." Marcus forced himself to look at her. Her eyes were green-gray, brighter now with held-back grief. "Why you?" he asked. "My father had letters, old ones. Most were packed away after he died. My mother couldn't look at them. I started reading them last year." Odette's thumb moved over the edge of the envelope. Elias Voss was mentioned twice, not as a close friend, more like someone connected to the dogs, retirement placements, handler support, things I barely understood. Marcus said nothing. "Then Elias wrote to me," she continued. "Said if I wanted to understand who my father was before the last day everyone talked about, I should look at the men and dogs he tried to protect when nobody was watching." The words landed softly, but they did not land gently. Marcus had remembered Evan mostly in the final 11 seconds. That was the cruelty of a sudden loss. It tried to turn a whole person into the way they left. But Evan had existed before that. He had laughed, complained, lost card games, written letters. Helped people Marcus had never met. Odette opened the envelope. Inside were photocopied records, a faded photograph, and several folded pages. She did not hand him everything at once. That mercy mattered. First came the photograph. It was blurred at one edge, the colors faded by time and cheap printing. 4 men stood beside a low concrete wall in harsh sunlight. Their faces were younger, leaner, squinting. Marcus recognized himself only because the past had his bones. Evan Hale stood beside him, grinning like he had just insulted fate and expected it to laugh along. Marcus's chest tightened. "He looks like you around the eyes," he said. Odette looked down at the photo. "People say that?" "They're right." She nodded, but the compliment did not behave like a compliment. It moved through her like a small ache. Next came a sheet of copied notes, names in a list, some crossed out, some circled. Beside Marcus's name, Elias had written, "Wren, calm hands with working dogs. Helmond, ask Hale if confirmed." Marcus let out a breath through his nose. "Elias didn't know I'd come here," he said. "No?" Odette's voice was steady again, but quiet. He wasn't predicting anything. He was making a list. People who might help Talon if Garrett or anyone else came looking. Garrett's name did not need to be said loudly. It entered the room and stood in the corner anyway. Marcus looked toward the hallway that led back to quarantine. Why didn't Elias call someone official? I think he tried. Odette touched one of the folded pages. Some of these are drafts, unsent. Some are copies of complaints that may or may not have reached the right desk. He was old, sick, maybe, and scared of drawing attention too quickly. Scared for Talon. Yes? A sound came from the hall, one soft thump. Not a bark, not a growl. Just the muted shift of a large dog settling near glass. Marcus imagined Talon standing behind the barrier, still guarding, still refusing to surrender the last assignment Elias had left in his bones. Odette pulled out one final slip of paper. It had been folded so many times the crease was nearly white. The handwriting was shaky, darker in some places where the pen had paused too long. She hesitated before handing it to Marcus. He read it. This dog was not washed out. He is being hunted. For a long moment, Marcus heard nothing but the storm worrying at the windows. Not washed out. Hunted. The words did not shout. They did not need to. They sat on the paper with the tired dignity of a man who had run out of time and used his last strength to point toward a danger he could not stop alone. Marcus placed the slip back on the desk with care. Odette watched his hand. I don't know what all of it means yet. You know enough to not give him to Garrett. Yes. And not enough to prove why. Not yet. There it was. The narrow bridge between fear and evidence. Marcus had crossed worse bridges. He had also watched them collapse. He looked down at the volunteer form. His name waited for a signature, a small thing, almost laughable. Men like to imagine that turning points came with thunder, with trumpets, with gods appearing on mountain ridges and pointing swords toward destiny. Sometimes they came as a cheat pen and a line on a shelter form. Marcus signed. Odette did not smile. She understood, perhaps, that this was not a happy decision. It was heavier than that. "I'm not promising anything beyond temporary help," he said. "I know. I'm not taking him home. I didn't ask. I'm not good at this." "At what?" Marcus looked at the photograph again. Evan Hale, young and alive, grinning under a sun that belonged to another lifetime. Being what people need after it matters. Odette's face changed, not with pity. If she had pitied him, Marcus might have left. Instead, she looked at him with the painful steadiness of someone who had also lived beside an absence long enough to know it had weather. "Maybe don't start with people," she said. "Start with the dog." That almost broke something open. Marcus turned toward the hallway before she could see too much. Talon was visible through the interior window now. He stood at the glass, head level, eyes fixed on them. Not impatient, not pleading. Watching. Marcus walked back slowly, the envelope's words still moving through his mind. This dog was not washed out. He is being hunted. At the quarantine glass, Marcus stopped. This time, when he looked at Talon, he did not see only grief. He did not see only a stubborn dog refusing food because the world had taken his person. He saw a message carried through snow, old letters, a dead man's careful hands, a daughter searching for her father, and a name Marcus had spent years trying not to deserve. Talon's breath fogged the inside of the glass. Marcus lifted his hand, not to touch, not to command, only to let the dog see it. Empty, steady enough. "We're not done," he said. Talon did not wag his tail. He did not soften into gratitude. He simply held Marcus's gaze, stern and weary and alive, as if the statement had been accepted into the official record. Behind Marcus, Odette stood with Elias's envelope pressed lightly against her chest. Outside, snow continued falling over Missoula, patient as time, covering roads, roofs, and old tracks. But inside Silver Pines, one path had begun to show itself through the white, a path made of names that had survived, letters that had not been sent, and a German shepherd whose silence was no longer empty. It was testimony. By noon, Silver Pines had become less like a rescue shelter and more like a small, exhausted courthouse with dog hair on every surface. Files covered Odette's desk. Printed intake forms, transfer records, vaccination sheets, chip scans, handwritten notes, photographs of Talon from Elias Voss's cabin, and the trembling sentence from the old man's folded paper. This dog was not washed out. He is being hunted. Marcus stood beside the desk with his arms crossed, looking down at the documents as if they were a map of hostile terrain. He understood maps. He understood lines, gaps, missing roads, false cover. Paperwork had its own geography, and this one was full of ravines. Odette sat in front of the computer, one hand on the mouse, the other wrapped around a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Her hair was tied low, but loose strands had escaped around her face. There was nothing delicate about the way she worked. She searched, compared, wrote notes, and moved from screen to paper with the focus of a woman who had learned grief could either drown you or sharpen you. Dr. Naomi Kessler stood near the counter with Talon's chip report clipped to a board, her glasses sliding down her nose. "This is the problem," Naomi said, tapping the sheet with a pen. "His chip format is older, but not random. It's consistent with working dog registration tied to private training contracts. Not active military ownership exactly, more like a partner program." Marcus looked at the line of numbers. To anyone else it might have been nothing. Digits, abbreviations, old codes, transfer fields. But Marcus had spent enough years around systems to know when a file had been handled by too many hands trying not to leave fingerprints. Odette scrolled down the screen. First entry, operational placement. Second, retirement review. Third, transfer pending, then not suitable for continued service. Then nothing for 8 months. Then Elias, Naomi said. Then Elias, Odette repeated. But not officially. Talon shows up in county records only after Elias dies. Marcus's jaw moved once. Naomi noticed. Say it. He didn't fall through cracks, Marcus said. Someone made cracks for him. The office went quiet. Outside the window, snow slid from the edge of the roof in a soft white curtain. Somewhere down the hall, a dog gave a sleepy huff. The world kept pretending to be ordinary. Odette opened another folder. Talon isn't the only one. Naomi's expression changed before Marcus's did. She already knew what was coming and disliked it medically, morally, and probably spiritually. We received 3 dogs from smaller rescues yesterday morning, Odette said. Emergency overflow. The storm pushed intake everywhere. I put them in the auxiliary wing because the main kennels are full. Marcus looked at her. Odette held up a hand before he could speak. Temporarily. 24 hours, maybe 48. It wasn't ideal, but they had heat, water, and separation. We weren't warehousing them. I didn't say you were. You were about to think it loudly. Naomi snorted. He does have a loud-thinking face. Marcus ignored that because it was inconveniently true. Odette laid 3 folders beside Talon's. Each had a name written in marker on a temporary shelter tab. Bruno, Sable, June. Bruno is a shepherd mix, 8 or 9. Sable is a Dutch shepherd, maybe 5. June is older, probably 7, Belgian cross. All came from different small facilities, all supposedly approved for private experienced placement. All had transfer requests connected to the same intermediary. Marcus leaned over the papers. Name? North Star Companion Transfer, Odette said. Naomi gave a humorless laugh. Companion? That's generous. Address? Marcus asked. Odette clicked another tab. A rented mailbox near Great Falls. No kennel license under that name. Phone number goes to voicemail. Website is 1 page with stock photos and a mission statement that sounds like it was written by a committee trapped in a broom closet. Miles Arlen appeared in the doorway, holding a stack of leashes and a roll of labels. Do we hate North Star? He asked. We are developing concerns, Naomi said. So yes, but legally? Exactly. Miles nodded gravely. I'll hate them in pencil. He set the labels down and retreated before Naomi could assign him something heavy. Marcus stared at the 3 temporary names. Bruno, Sable, June. Names given by shelters because someone before them had made the original ones disappear. It bothered him more than he expected. A name was not decoration. A name was a handhold, a record that someone, somewhere, had seen you clearly enough to call you back. Strip that away, and a living creature became inventory. He looked toward the hall that led to Talon's quarantine room. Behind glass, Talon had a name. Elias had protected that much. Not every dog had been so lucky. Odette rubbed her forehead. I can keep them here while we verify, but if their paperwork is technically valid, we need more than suspicion. Naomi folded her arms. The suspicion has a pulse and 4 legs. The law doesn't accept that phrasing. It should. Marcus picked up Garrett Fenn's note, still sealed in the plastic sleeve. Then get someone who speaks law. Odette hesitated. I called Deputy Brigg. Marcus looked at her. When? After Garrett left yesterday. And? She's coming. As if the shelter had heard its cue, the front bell rang. Deputy Laurel Brigg entered without bringing drama with her. She was around 50, tall enough to look most men in the eye, and solid enough that Winter seemed to treat her with professional respect. Snow dusted the shoulders of her brown duty parka. Her short salt and pepper hair was tucked under a black knit cap, and a small notebook was already in her hand before she finished stamping her boots on the mat. Her face had the weathered honesty of Montana rock, not warm at first touch, but unlikely to move under pressure. Odette met her at the desk. "Deputy Brigg, thank you for coming." Laurel glanced around the lobby, taking in Marcus, Naomi, the files, the hallway, the camera positions, and the nearest exit in one sweep. "This about Elias Voss's dog?" she asked. "And possibly others," Odette said. Laurel's pale eyes rested on Marcus for half a second. "You are?" "Marcus Wren." "Your role?" "Currently unclear." Naomi muttered, "Temporary floor sitter." Laurel wrote something in her notebook. "That a certified position?" "Not yet," Marcus said. For the first time, something almost like amusement moved across Laurel's face. It vanished quickly. Odette explained the situation without embellishment. Talon's old chip, Garrett's claim, Elias's papers, the 3 other dogs with similar transfers, North Star's questionable address. She did not mention destiny, instinct, or the way Talon had growled at Garrett. She mentioned observable behavior, document gaps, medical hold, and legal uncertainty. Laurel listened without interrupting. When Odette finished, the deputy closed her notebook. "I understand why you're concerned," Laurel said. "But concern doesn't give me authority to seize a dog or accuse a man of anything." Marcus felt irritation rise, quick and sharp. Laurel looked at him as if she had heard it. "That a problem?" "You saw the files." "I saw incomplete files." "You heard what Garrett brought." "I heard he brought a handwritten note, receipts, and a claim he helped the deceased. He called Talon property." Laurel's expression did not change. "People use ugly words and still have legal standing." Naomi made a small sound of disgust. Laurel turned to her. "Doctor, if you put half the county in cuffs for bad wording, I'll need a larger jail." "That's a medical recommendation," Naomi said, noted and ignored. Odette stepped in before the room turned into a courtroom with worse chairs. "What do you need?" "Verification, original documents if possible, proof the intermediary isn't legitimate, records from Voss's property that show he was hiding the dog from a specific threat, not just being eccentric." Marcus looked toward the window. Elias's cabin, 30 miles out. Snow getting worse. A road that would not improve by waiting. Laurel followed his gaze. "County has access to the property until next of kin is confirmed. I can go. You can't enter without permission." Marcus looked back at her. "I can stand outside and admire the porch." "You can ride along if Odette confirms you're connected to the shelter's temporary evaluation and you don't touch anything unless I ask." "That's a lot of conditions." "I enjoy them." Odette looked between them. "Marcus knows what to look for in working dog records?" Laurel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Does he know how not to contaminate a scene?" Marcus said, "I've managed." People who say that usually haven't. He held her gaze. "Then I'll stand where you tell me." That seemed to satisfy her, or at least disappoint her less. Before they left, Marcus walked once to Talon's glass. The German shepherd stood near the back, alert but not frantic. His eyes moved from Marcus to Laurel's shape in the hallway, then back. Marcus wondered if the dog knew when the living had begun following the trail left by the dead. "Going to see your old place," Marcus said quietly. Talon did not move, but his notched ear tipped forward. Elias Voss's cabin sat beyond Lolo Creek, where the road narrowed and the trees came close enough to scrape snow across the truck doors. Laurel drove a county SUV with chains on the tires and a radio that cracked now and then with weather updates. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, watching the forest pass in slow white ranks. Laurel did not make small talk. Marcus appreciated that, until she spoke. "You always glare at paperwork like it insulted your mother?" "My mother would have insulted it first." Laurel's mouth twitched. "Fair." The cabin appeared at the end of a rutted drive, half buried in snow, smoke-dark logs under a roof, loaded thick and white. No light in the windows, no fresh tracks except what the wind had not yet erased. A length of old lead line hung from a porch hook, half swallowed by snow. Marcus stepped out of the SUV and stopped. The place felt occupied by absence. Not haunted. He did not believe in that, except on bad nights when belief and memory traded masks. But the cabin held the shape of a life interrupted. Shovel against wall, stacked wood under tarp, one glove on the porch rail as if its owner might return after checking the road. Laurel unlocked the door with a county key and paused. "You remember the conditions? Don't touch unless asked. Don't wander. Don't improve your opinion of me too quickly. That last one won't be a problem." Inside, the cabin smelled of cold ash, old wool, dry wood, and dog. Talon's presence remained everywhere. Scratches near the door, a heavy water bowl in the kitchen, a blanket folded beside the stove, black and tan hairs caught in the fibers. On the wall by the small table hung photographs. Elias as a younger man in uniform, Elias older beside a snow-dusted porch. Talon standing at his knee through 4 different seasons. Not hidden, honored. Marcus studied the pictures without touching them. In each, Talon stood close but never slumped into dependence. He looked like a dog with a job, even when the job was simply watching over an old man in a lonely place. Laurel photographed the room before opening drawers. There was no dramatic hidden chamber, no lockbox under floorboards. No single glowing clue waiting like a gift from a lazy god. There was only careful sadness. Receipts for dog food organized by month. Vet appointment cards clipped together. A vaccination record in a plastic sleeve. A handwritten log of vehicles seen near the property. Dates, times, partial plates, descriptions. A note near one entry read, "Fen came after dark. Asked again if dog was still worth anything. Told him not to return." Laurel's expression hardened for the first time. Marcus felt the air shift. There it was, not proof of everything, not yet, but a shape in the snow. Laurel photographed the page, then placed it in an evidence sleeve. They found more in a metal recipe box on a shelf above the stove. Letters Elias had drafted but never mailed. Copies of complaints sent to animal welfare offices, to contract administrators, to anyone whose address he could find. Some were formal at first. Later ones became less polished, the handwriting more uneven. Marcus read one at Laurel's request, holding it carefully at the edges. "These dogs are not surplus equipment. Their records are being altered after retirement review. Please verify transfer numbers before authorizing release." Another page listed names, some human, some canine, some crossed out. Beside Talon's name, Elias had written, "Safe for now. Fen knows too much." Marcus set the page down. His chest felt tight, but not in the way Helmand made it tight. This was not panic. This was anger given a task. Laurel took the papers one by one. "Old man was thorough," she said. "He was scared." Both can be true. Marcus looked at the photographs again. Elias and Talon, winter, spring, winter again. 2 years of a man standing between a dog and whatever had been coming. "Garrett isn't the center," Marcus said. Laurel sealed another sleeve. "No. He's the porch light." She glanced at him. "The one you see from the road," Marcus said, "means there's a house behind it." Laurel nodded slowly. "That may be the first useful poetic thing I've heard today. I try to keep it rare." "Please do." By the time they finished, the storm had thickened outside. The world beyond the porch was nearly gone. Laurel carried the sealed papers under her coat. Marcus stood at the threshold, looking down. Near the porch steps, half covered by blown snow, were old paw prints hardened and softened by time. Talons, probably. Large, steady, leading from the cabin toward the trees and back again. A patrol route, a habit, a promise worn into the ground. Snow was filling them now. Marcus stepped carefully around the prints as if they were graves. Laurel locked the cabin behind them. "I'll forward this to a federal contact," she said. "Agent Victor Madsen. He works interstate animal trafficking and document fraud. If there's a pattern beyond county lines, he'll know what to ask." Marcus nodded. "You understand," Laurel added. "This doesn't mean we storm castles tonight. I've had enough castles. It means we preserve evidence, slow down transfers, verify ownership, and keep everyone from doing something stupid because they feel righteous." Marcus looked at her. "That aimed at me?" "You're in range." For once he did not resent it. They stood under the porch roof while snow fell beyond them, white and relentless. In another kind of story, this would have been the moment of triumph. The hidden box found, the villain named, the hero's path cleared. But the cabin offered no triumph. Only the plain proof that Elias Voss had spent his last years as a poor guardian of names others had tried to erase. Marcus looked at the buried paw prints. Some creatures did not need medals, speeches, or carved stones. They needed records that held. They needed someone to say, "This one lived, this one served, this one belonged to more than a transfer number." Behind him, Laurel opened the SUV door. Marcus took one last look at the cabin. Then he followed, carrying nothing in his hands because the evidence belonged to the law now, but feeling the weight of it all the same. In the white silence of the Montana afternoon, Talon's name seemed to stand taller than the snow. The second storm arrived as if the first had only been a scout. By late afternoon, Missoula had vanished behind moving walls of white. Snow no longer fell in soft pieces. It drove sideways through the pines, struck the windows, and clawed along the roof lines with the blind persistence of something old and hungry. The trees behind Silver Pines bent under the weight of it, their branches loaded until they groaned like tired backs. Inside the shelter, every hour became a negotiation. The power flickered at 3, failed at 3:20, returned at 3:30, then gave up again with a tired click that silenced the hall heaters and made every dog in the building lift its head. A second later, the generator coughed awake behind the building. The lights came back dimmer. Red emergency bulbs glowed over the hallways, turning Silver Pines into a strange little arc, sailing through a frozen night. Odette moved from room to room with a clipboard under one arm and a flashlight clipped to her vest. Her mustard-colored storm parka hung open because she refused to slow down long enough to overheat or freeze properly. She checked water bowls, kennel latches, heat lamps, medical notes. Her hair had escaped its low tie and clung to her cheek in damp strands, but her voice stayed calm. Calm, Marcus noticed, was not always softness. Sometimes it was command without volume. Dr. Naomi Kessler had claimed the treatment room as her kingdom of controlled panic. She organized blankets, warming pads, medications, extra leads, and emergency kits with the brisk irritation of a woman who believed chaos was personally disrespectful. Every time the lights flickered, she looked up as if preparing to scold the ceiling. Miles Arlen carried crates from the side storage area with heroic intention and questionable technique. His red knit cap sat crooked over his curls, and snowmelt darkened the shoulders of his blue shelter hoodie. "If we survive tonight," Miles announced while dragging a folded wire crate across the floor, "I'm asking for a new title." Naomi did not look up from sorting syringes. "Person who drags crates loudly?" "Senior weather negotiator." "You're holding the snow shovel upside down." Miles looked down at the shovel in his other hand. There was a long pause. "I was establishing dominance." "You're losing?" Odette passed behind them with 2 wool blankets. Miles, shovel. Naomi, supplies. Marcus, Can you check the auxiliary wing doors again?" Marcus nodded and moved down the side hallway. He had arrived earlier that day after Laurel called to say Agent Victor Madsen had acknowledged the files from Elias's cabin, but would need time to cross-check the transfer records. Time, Marcus had thought, was the one thing bad weather and bad men both liked to steal. Now he checked the auxiliary wing with a flashlight in one hand. The older section of Silver Pines had been built before the main kennels were renovated. It was sturdy enough for temporary use, but not proud about it. Low roof, narrow hall, heated pipes wrapped in insulation, 4 kennels along the left wall, storage shelves on the right, and one door leading to a small fenced turnout buried waist-deep in snow. Talon stood in the front kennel, not because it was ideal, but because the quarantine room had lost steady heat, and Naomi had approved the move only after making a face that could have curdled milk. The 3 other questionable transfer dogs were there too, Bruno, broad-faced and gray around the muzzle, Sable, lean and watchful with a dark mask, and June, older, pale around the eyes, wrapped in the dignity of a queen who had seen too many fools. Marcus did not like them being there. Odette liked it less. But the main wing was full from storm intakes, and the auxiliary area had working heat for the moment. Everyone at Silver Pines knew the decision was temporary. Unfortunately, winter did not care what humans meant by temporary. Talon watched Marcus through the kennel door. He had eaten a little that morning. Not enough for celebration, enough for Naomi to stop using the phrase, "we may need to escalate," with that quiet veterinary menace of hers. Marcus crouched outside the kennel. "You drew the ugly room," he said. Talon's notched ear tipped forward. "I've slept in worse." Bruno gave a low snore from his blanket. Marcus looked at the ceiling. A faint creak moved through the old beams as wind pushed against the building. He followed it with his eyes. Load points, corners, metal supports, snow weight. Not good, not catastrophic. Yet. He returned to the lobby just as the front bell rang. Every human in Silver Pines went still for half a breath. No one was expected. Roads were sliding toward closure. The county had issued another warning. The kind of person who came to a rescue shelter in weather like this either needed help badly or wanted something badly enough to risk the road. Garrett Fenn stood in the entrance with snow on his shoulders and a hard, offended expression arranged on his face like a mask. Behind him was another man Marcus had not seen before. The stranger was slimmer than Garrett, maybe mid-40s, wearing a dark coat too clean for the weather, and black gloves that looked new. His hair was hidden beneath a wool cap, and his face was ordinary in the way a closed door was ordinary. He carried a leather folder under one arm and looked around the lobby without seeming to look at anything directly. His eyes passed over the security camera near the ceiling, then quickly away. Marcus saw that. So did Laurel Brigg, who stood near the reception desk with a county radio clipped to her parka. Deputy Laurel had arrived an hour earlier, officially to ensure the disputed dogs were not transferred until documents were verified, unofficially because she trusted Garrett Fenn about as much as she trusted thin ice under a pickup truck. Her short salt and pepper hair was tucked under a black knit cap, and her notebook was already open. Garrett stomped snow from his boots. "Hell of a night," he said. Odette came forward. "Roads are nearly closed, Mr. Fenn." "Then we'll be quick." The man beside him smiled with professional emptiness. "Miss Hale, I'm Warren Pike. I represent Mountain Crown Working Dog Rehabilitation." He handed her a card. Odette did not take it immediately. "Rehabilitation," Naomi said from the treatment room doorway. "That's a busy word." Pike's smile did not change. "We provide experienced placement and retraining support for retired working animals." Marcus watched his hands. Still. Too still. Garrett pulled a plastic sleeve from inside his jacket. "We've got transport documents. Talon, Bruno, Sable, and June. They're on the list. You've delayed long enough." Odette took the papers now, slowly, and carried them to the desk. Laurel stepped beside her. "I'll need to review those." Garrett's face tightened. "This is getting ridiculous." "Most legal processes do," Laurel said. "They're shy about being entertaining." Pike gave a soft laugh, as if everyone had agreed to be civilized. "Deputy, we're not here to create difficulty. The weather has complicated an already scheduled transfer. These animals are expected at a facility with appropriate resources." Naomi walked closer, arms folded. "Interesting, because one of those animals is on a medical hold." Pike turned to her. "And you are?" "The person who decides what medical hold means in this building." Garrett pointed toward the hall. "That dog belonged to Elias. Elias wanted me to handle him." "Talon's records are under review," Odette said. "And the other three?" Pike asked, still calm. "Those are not personal animals of Mr. Voss. Their transfer authorization is clear." Laurel lifted one page toward the light. "Clear is generous." Garrett's eyes flashed. "You people are treating me like a criminal because a dog growled." Marcus spoke for the first time. "No." Garrett turned toward him. Marcus stood beside Odette, hands low, body still. He did not crowd Garrett, did not raise his voice, did not even step between him and anyone else, though every line of him suggested he could. "Not because of the growl," Marcus said, "because you keep forgetting his name." The room quieted. Garrett gave a short, ugly laugh. "You think this is about feelings?" "No," Marcus said. "That's what worries me." Pike's eyes moved to the camera again. Laurel saw that too. She took her radio from her shoulder and spoke quietly into it, requesting verification on Mountain Crown working dog rehabilitation, North Star companion transfer, and the vehicle plates outside. She used no dramatic language, no accusation, just names, numbers, and a tone that said paper could become a net if thrown correctly. Pike's smile thinned. Odette returned the documents to the desk. "No dog leaves Silver Pines tonight." Garrett stepped closer. "You don't understand what you're poking." Odette held his gaze. "Then explain it on the record." That stopped him. For 1 second the mask slipped. Sweat shone at Garrett's temple, despite the cold lobby. Not much, just enough. Marcus saw it trace down toward his beard before Garrett wiped it away with the back of his glove. The generator faltered outside. The lights dipped. In the red emergency glow, Garrett looked less like a bully and more like a man who had borrowed anger because fear fit him too tightly. From the auxiliary wing came a low sound. Talon. Not loud, not uncontrolled. A warning pressed through the hallway. Garrett's shoulders jerked before he could hide it. Marcus noticed. So did Laurel. Pike did not turn toward the sound. That, somehow, was worse. He kept facing Odette, as if the dog behind the walls was only cargo making noise. Garrett took another step, angling closer to Odette, his voice dropping low. "You think because you run some soft little rescue, the world is going to clap for you? You have no idea who you're making trouble for." Talon struck the kennel door. The sound cracked down the hall like metal splitting winter. Every conversation died. Marcus moved half a step forward, no more. His voice stayed quiet enough that Garrett had to listen. "You heard him," Marcus said. "Even the dog wants you to keep your distance." Near the treatment room, Miles whispered, with devastatingly poor timing, "I also want that, but I'm afraid to growl." Naomi closed her eyes. Odette's mouth trembled once, not from fear this time. She almost laughed, almost. Then she pulled herself back into stillness. Laurel pointed at Garrett with her pen. "Back up." Garrett looked at Pike. Pike gave him nothing, and that was when the old pine behind the auxiliary wing gave way. The first sound was not the crash. It was a groan, deep, wooden, ancient, a sound that seemed to rise from the roots of the mountain itself. Marcus turned before the others did. The second sound was sharper, branches breaking under snow weight, one after another, a rapid series of heavy cracks swallowed by wind. Then came the impact. The building shook. A roar slammed through the shelter as the pines struck the auxiliary roof. Dogs erupted in barking. The lights snapped off. For one blind second, Silver Pines disappeared into blackness and sound. Then the emergency system kicked in. Red light flooded the halls. Someone shouted. A kennel door rattled. A dog cried out. Not pain exactly. Fear. Confusion. The old universal language of beings suddenly trapped where a moment before there had been air. Odette was already running. Talon! Marcus followed, with Laurel behind him and Naomi grabbing the emergency kit from the treatment room. Miles stumbled after them, carrying a coil of rope, either by instinct or accident. The auxiliary hallway had changed shape. The far corner of the roof had caved inward under the weight of the fallen tree. Snow poured through the break. A section of shelving had buckled, wire panels bent at strange angles. One overhead beam sagged low enough to turn the passage into a crooked tunnel. The front section still held, but only barely. Cold air rushed in hard, carrying needles of snow. Talon's kennel had been twisted, but not crushed. Bruno's door was partly blocked by a fallen shelf. Sable barked in sharp bursts from the second run. June had gone silent, which made Marcus like the situation less. "Talon!" Odette called again. A low growl answered from inside. Weak, steady, alive. Odette pressed a hand to her chest for half a second, then forced herself back into motion. "Bruno, Sable, June, Naomi?" "I hear two," Naomi said, already crouching near the safer edge. "Maybe three. I need light." Miles fumbled with his flashlight and turned it on, facing himself. He winced. "I'm useful in theory." "Turn it around," Naomi snapped. "Right, practical improvement." Laurel spoke into her radio, voice controlled. "Structural damage at Silver Pines Animal Rescue. Multiple animals trapped. Need fire rescue, animal control backup, and road clearance if available. Also advise Agent Madsen this may involve disputed transport animals." At the end of the hall, Marcus caught movement through the snow haze. Garrett was backing away, not toward the trapped dogs, toward the lobby. Pike had his phone out, one gloved hand cupped around it, as he moved toward the front entrance, trying to find signal. Laurel saw him too. "Fen!" she barked. "Stay where I can see you." Garrett froze, then lifted both hands slightly. "I'm not doing anything." "No," Laurel said. "You're trying not to." Pike opened the front door. Wind punched into the lobby. Marcus did not follow. His eyes were on the auxiliary wing. The sagging beam creaked again. There are moments when memory returns not as pictures, but as instructions. Not now, Marcus told himself. But Hellman did not ask if it was welcome. The sound of wood under pressure became something else. The red emergency light became dusk through dust. Dogs barking became voices overlapping on a radio. Snow hit his face, but his body remembered heat. His chest tightened around an old battlefield where men had called for one another through chaos, and seconds had become cruel little gods. He felt the edge of it, the drop, the place his mind sometimes went when the present lost its shape. Then Odette's voice cut through. "Marcus." Not loud, not pleading, just his name, placed in the room like a hand on a railing. He looked at her. Her face was pale under the red light, but she was standing. Afraid, yes. Shaken, yes. But not gone. "Talon answered," she said. "He's inside." The present returned by inches. Red light, snow, kennels, rope, Naomi, Laurel, Miles, 4 dogs, not ghosts, not Hellman, 4 dogs. Marcus pulled off his parka and dropped it near the wall. Underneath, his olive combat shirt clung close to his shoulders, camouflage sleeves darkened by melted snow. He flexed his hands once, then reached for the rope Miles was holding. Miles handed it over immediately. "I was hoping you'd know why I brought this." "Good instinct. I'm writing that down later. Survive first. Strong order. Clear." Marcus looped the rope around his waist and checked the knot. Then he checked it again, because trust was not the same as carelessness. Laurel stepped close. "Rescue is on the way." "How far?" "In this weather? Not close enough." "That roof shifts again. They won't get time." Laurel's jaw tightened. "You go in there, and it comes down. I have a bigger problem." "I'm not going in to be heroic." "Then why?" Marcus looked into the broken auxiliary hall. Snow blew through the damaged roof, covering the kennel floor in white. Behind bent wire and fallen wood, Talon gave one more low sound. Not panic. A signal. Marcus thought of Elias Voss's notes, of names written carefully because someone had tried to make them disappear, of Talon standing guard inside a room that was failing around him, of Bruno, Sable, and June, 3 temporary shelter names that still deserved to be called by someone. He looked back at Laurel. "There are 4 living creatures in there," he said. "They don't get to become missing records while we wait for better weather." Laurel held his gaze. For once she did not argue. Odette moved toward the broken hall, but Marcus shook his head. "You call him," he said. "Stay where the floor holds. If he hears you steady, he stays steady." Odette swallowed and nodded. Naomi opened the kit. "If any of them are shocky, I need them handed out slowly." "No dragging unless there's no choice." Marcus nodded. Miles wrapped the rope around his gloved hands and braced his boots. His face was pale, but he did not step back. "I've got you," Miles said. Marcus looked at the knot, then at Miles. "Then don't blink dramatically." "I'll blink in moderation." The beam creaked again. Marcus lowered himself toward the tilted opening in the auxiliary hall. Odette leaned close enough for her voice to carry through the broken space. "Talon," she called, steady as she could make it. "Hold on, boy." From inside the ruined wing came the answer, a low growl, tired, faint, still guarding. Marcus took one breath, slow and deep, and stepped into the red-lit mouth of the broken hallway. Not toward glory, not toward the past, toward the 4 names that had not yet been erased. Marcus did not rush into the broken wing like a man trying to prove he could not die. He had known men like that, brave men, loud men, men who treated danger like a door that would always open for them because it had opened before. Some had come home older than their years. Some had not come home in any way that mattered. Marcus had learned early that courage without patience was only pride wearing better boots. So he stopped at the mouth of the auxiliary hall and made everyone stop with him. The damaged wing breathed cold into the shelter. Snow blew through the broken roof in hard white threads, spinning through the red emergency light. The fallen pine pressed down on one corner of the structure, its branches clawing through torn roofing and splintered beams. The old hallway had folded inward, not completely collapsed, but bent into a narrow, dangerous passage. Inside, the dogs made different sounds. Bruno gave a low, frightened whine. Sable barked in sharp, panicked bursts. June was quiet, which worried Naomi most, and Talon, somewhere beyond the bent wire and falling snow, answered Odette's voice with a low growl that was tired but awake. Marcus crouched, studying the gap. "Lights low," he said. "No beams in their eyes." Naomi was already setting out blankets, soft leads, a small medical kit, and warming packs near the safest section of hallway. "If they come out shaking, hand them to me slowly. I need to check breathing, gums, body temperature. Nobody crowds them." Laurel Brigg stood near the lobby entrance with her radio in one hand and her notebook shoved into her parka pocket. Her face was hard in the red glow, practical as a locked gate. "Fire rescue is moving, but roads are ugly. Animal control is coming behind them. Madsen's been updated. Garrett? Marcus asked without looking away from the gap. At the side lot, Laurel said. Trying to become someone else's problem. He isn't succeeding. Miles Arlen stood behind Marcus holding the rope with both hands. His red knit cap had slid almost over one eyebrow, and his face had gone the color of paper left in snow. "What if I mess up?" Miles asked. Marcus took the rope from him, checked the coil, then checked the knot Miles had tied around his own anchor point. "If you let go," Marcus said, dry as old timber, "I'll come back and haunt you for tying that knot badly." Miles swallowed. "That is both motivating and upsetting." "Good. Tie it again." Miles did. This time his hands shook less. Marcus looped the rope around his own waist and secured it with quick, economical movements. Not dramatic, not pretty, useful. His olive combat shirt had darkened where melted snow soaked into the sleeves. The faded tattoo on his right forearm appeared and vanished as he tightened the line. He clipped a flashlight low on his chest, angled downward. Odette stood where Marcus had told her to stand, close enough for her voice to carry, far enough that a second shift in the roof would not take her under it. Her face was pale, but she did not step back. She held a soft lead in one hand and Talon's name in the other, as if the name itself were a rope. Marcus looked at her. "You call him steady," he said. "Not scared, not sweet. Steady." Odette nodded once. "Talon," she called into the broken wing, voice controlled though the edges trembled. "Stay with us, boy." The answer came from inside, a low rumble. Marcus lowered himself into the gap. The world narrowed immediately. Outside, the shelter had been noise and movement. Inside the broken hallway, everything became close. Splintered wood near his shoulder, bent shelving against his left side, snow needling the back of his neck, the smell of wet insulation, frightened animals, and cold metal. The floor angled under his boots. A cracked beam hung low enough that he had to duck beneath it and shift sideways. He placed the flashlight beam along the floor, never toward the dog's eyes. "Easy," he said, not to the dogs only, to himself. The old part of his mind began counting before he asked it to. 3 feet to the first kennel, sagging beam overhead, shelf pressure on right, exit line clear, sound above, unstable, but holding. This was not Helmand. He repeated it silently. This was Montana. This was Silver Pines. This was snow, not dust. Wood, not stone. Dogs, not men calling across smoke. No one was asking him to become younger. No one was asking him to win a war. He only had to move one living creature at a time. Bruno was closest. The old shepherd mix had wedged himself half behind a fallen storage bin, his gray muzzle dusted with snow, eyes wide and glassy with fear. His kennel door had twisted, but the latch was reachable. Marcus stopped several feet away and let Bruno see the shape of him without feeling chased. "Bruno," he said softly, "you drew the first ticket, old man." Behind him, Naomi called, "No rushing. Let him smell the lead." "Copy." Marcus slid the soft lead along the floor, slow as a shadow. Bruno's nose twitched. His body trembled so hard the bin rattled against him. Talon growled from deeper inside. Marcus turned the light slightly. There he was. The German shepherd stood past the second kennel, shoulders lowered, wet snow collecting along his back. His notched ear was forward. His body blocked part of the narrow passage where Sable's kennel had buckled, and June lay beyond. Talon was not trapped in the worst place. He could have pushed toward Marcus. He could have demanded out. Instead, he had made himself a wall. Marcus understood before he admired it. Admiration could wait. "Yeah," Marcus murmured, "you're still on duty." Talon's eyes flashed amber in the low light. Marcus lifted one hand, palm open. "I know. I see them." The dog did not soften. Good. Softness was not the point. Marcus turned back to Bruno. Inch by inch, he got the lead over the old dog's head. Bruno tried to pull away once, but Marcus kept the pressure loose, his voice lower than the storm. "No fight, just walking out of a bad room, that's all." Bruno rose with difficulty. The beam above groaned. Everyone outside heard it. Miles squeaked, then whispered, "That was the building, not me." "Less commentary," Laurel snapped. "Understood." Marcus guided Bruno toward the opening. Halfway there, the old dog froze, claws scraping on the tilted floor. Fear locked him in place. Odette's voice came from outside. "Bruno, good boy, this way. Come on, sweetheart." It was the right voice, not pitying, not frantic. A lantern in a storm. Bruno moved again. Marcus handed the lead through the gap. Naomi received the dog with both arms, wrapped him in a blanket, and shifted him away from the opening. Her hands went to his chest, then his gums, then along his legs with efficient tenderness. "One out," she said. No one cheered. The roof had not earned cheering. Marcus went back in. Sable was next. She was lean, dark-faced, and wild-eyed, barking in bursts that bounced around the broken hall. Her kennel door had bent outward enough to create a narrow wedge. Marcus could reach her, but only if he passed close to Talon. The German shepherd moved half a step in front of him, not toward attack, toward refusal. Marcus stopped. Their eyes met in the red dimness and blowing snow. Talon's growl was low, worn thin by cold and stress, but it carried a clear message. "Not past me unless I know why." Marcus lowered the flashlight farther. "Fair," he said. He took half a step back. Outside, Laurel called, "Problem?" "Negotiation," Miles muttered. "With a dog or the architecture?" "Both," Marcus said. He turned his face slightly toward Talon, not straight on. "You're in charge inside. I'll be staff." The growl shifted. Not gone. Different. Talon looked once toward Sable, then back at Marcus. Permission was too human a word for what passed between them. But something changed in the air. Talon moved enough for Marcus to slide by. Sable snapped once at the lead, not viciously, just overwhelmed. Marcus waited. His hand did not jerk back. Panic wanted rhythm. If he gave it speed, it would grow teeth. "Easy," he said. "Nobody's stealing your sky." Talon stepped toward Sable's kennel and put his shoulder near the bent wire, blocking the worst of the snow gust. Sable's barking broke, faltered, then lowered into a trembling whine. Marcus got the lead on her. When he guided her out, the roof shifted with a long wooden moan. A rush of snow fell behind them. Talon pressed forward, not running, but driving Sable away from the sagging corner with his body. Marcus moved with them, one hand on the lead, the other braced against the wall. They reached the opening together. Sable shot through too fast, nearly taking Marcus's balance. Miles yelped and tightened the rope, planting his boots with all the dignity of a man wrestling the weather itself. "Two out," Naomi called. Marcus took one breath, then another. His chest had begun to ache, but it was the clean ache of cold air and effort, not the old suffocating thing. He held on to that difference. June remained. The older female was pressed into the far corner where a panel had bowed inward. She had not made a sound. Her pale muzzle rested on her paws, eyes open, body shaking in tiny waves. Not injured badly, Marcus hoped. Shocked, frozen by fear. Talon stood over her now, not touching, guarding. Marcus crawled lower to pass under a cracked support. The space narrowed so much his shoulder scraped wood. The rope tugged at his waist. "Slack," he called. Miles gave him more. "A tasteful amount of slack," Marcus added. "I don't know what that means." "Less than panic." "Working on it?" Marcus reached June, but she did not lift her head. Her eyes rolled toward him, white showing at the edges. Naomi's voice came from outside. "If she won't stand, don't pull hard. Use the blanket drag if you can." Marcus spotted a folded kennel mat, half trapped under a shelf. He shifted it free, inch by inch. June flinched when it moved. Talon growled, not at Marcus, at the movement. Marcus paused. Then Talon did something small that changed the room. He lowered his head and nudged June's shoulder. Once. Gently. The old dog blinked. Marcus slid the mat beneath her chest. He clipped the lead loose, more guidance than restraint. As he worked, June suddenly panicked, twisting toward the broken wire. Marcus saw teeth flash near his sleeve. He did not yank away. Talon moved first. He placed one front paw squarely on the strap of the lead, pinning it to the floor. Not hard enough to trap June cruelly, just enough to stop the line from whipping wild. Marcus froze for half a breath. There it was, the thing Elias's notes had hinted at, the odd habit behind Talon's name. Not Talon as weapon, Talon as anchor. A paw placed on what might otherwise slip away. Good, Marcus whispered. Good hold. Talon kept the strap steady. Marcus eased June onto the mat. Together, man and dog moved her toward the exit, one careful foot, one sliding inch, one breath at a time. By then, headlights were cutting through the storm outside. Laurel's voice rang from the front. Federal vehicles on scene. Fire rescue behind them. Garrett shouted something in the side lot. Laurel answered in the tone of a woman who had run out of patience 3 winters ago. There was movement, doors, radios. Pike's voice trying to sound offended and failing. None of it mattered inside the broken hall. Only June mattered. Marcus guided her through the gap. Naomi and Odette took her together, wrapping her in blankets. June's head lifted weakly toward Odette's hand. 3 out, Naomi said, voice rougher now. Talon remained. The beam above him cracked, not groaned, cracked. Marcus turned. Talon. The German shepherd stood in the blowing snow, wet, shivering, eyes fixed on him. For the first time, the dog looked tired enough to be mortal. Odette called from outside. Talon, come. The dog looked toward her voice, then back to Marcus. Marcus held out the loose lead, but did not force it. Your turn. Talon stepped forward. The roof dropped another inch behind him. Now! Laurel shouted. Marcus moved. Talon moved with him. Snow spilled down in a white sheet. The rope snapped tight at Marcus's waist as Miles pulled, lost his footing, then dropped backward into the snow outside the broken threshold without letting go. I'm fine, Miles shouted from the floor. Emotionally unclear, physically useful. Marcus stumbled through the opening with Talon beside him. A second later, part of the auxiliary roof collapsed behind them in a heavy roar that shook snow from every remaining beam. Silence followed, then barking from the main kennels. Then Naomi's voice. Marcus? I'm here. Talon? Marcus looked down. The German shepherd stood beside him, soaked, trembling, one ear forward, the notched one slicked back by melted snow. He did not wag his tail, did not leap, did not collapse into gratitude as if the world owed humans a perfect ending. He simply stepped close and rested his head against Marcus's thigh. The weight of it was small. The meaning was not. Marcus put one hand on Talon's wet neck. Beneath the cold fur, the dog's pulse beat fast and stubborn. Alive. Present. Not erased. Outside, through the open lobby door, blue and white lights moved across the storm. Laurel had Garrett near the side lot, speaking into her radio while another officer stood by the truck. Warren Pike's leather folder was in Agent Victor Madsen's gloved hands now. Madsen himself had arrived, looking calm, dark-coated, and unhappy in a way that promised paperwork with teeth. This night would not end the whole network. Marcus knew that. Children's stories liked clean endings. One brave act, one bad man stopped, one storm washed away by morning. Real life preferred long roads, copied files, interviews, warrants, and tired people making sure the truth did not get lost between agencies. But tonight, one transport had been stopped. 4 dogs had come out of a failing building, and Talon's name had not vanished into a transfer sheet. Marcus stood in the red emergency light, with snow melting down his sleeves and Talon leaning against him like a vow neither of them was ready to say aloud. He did not feel healed. Healing was too grand a word, too smooth and shining for a moment this cold and messy. No god had descended into Silver Pines. No old wound had closed because a dog had touched his leg. But something had shifted. For years, Marcus's old skills had lived in him like locked weapons, relics from a life that had cost too much. Tonight, those same skills had counted beams, steadied breath, read fear, and carried the living out. Not victory, not absolution, but enough. In Marcus Wren's private kingdom of ghosts, enough was a sunrise no one else could see. By morning, the storm had spent most of its fury. It did not leave cleanly. Storms rarely did. Snow still drifted from the eaves of Silver Pines in slow white veils, and the pines behind the auxiliary wing stood bowed under their burden, as if ashamed of what one of their own had done. The broken section of roof was tarped in blue plastic and held down with sandbags, rope, and a level of prayer no one put on the repair invoice. The shelter smelled of damp wood, wet fur, coffee, and exhaustion. No one had slept much. Dr. Naomi Kessler moved between recovery kennels with a clipboard under one arm and a blanket over the other, checking gums, paws, breathing, body temperature, and the 1,000 small signs by which animals confessed what they could not say. Bruno had eaten half a bowl and then fallen asleep with his gray muzzle buried in a towel. Sable still startled at every door click, but had accepted water. June, wrapped like royalty in 2 blankets, had allowed Odette to stroke the top of her head for exactly 3 seconds before deciding dignity required distance. Miles Arlen had been given responsibility for inspecting rope, kennel latches, emergency lights, and the generator shed. He accepted the role as if knighted. "I have been promoted," he told Marcus solemnly, while carrying a toolbox he clearly considered too heavy for an ordinary citizen. "I am now Lord of things nobody wants to fix." Naomi, passing behind him, said, "Then begin your reign by fixing the backlatch." Miles nodded. "A noble quest. Also, your hat is on inside out." He touched the red knit cap on his head. "That's how nobles wear them." Marcus stood near the treatment room door with a paper cup of coffee going cold in his hand. His sleeves were clean now, though his shoulders still remembered the weight of wet snow. His body ached in places that had once been young enough to ignore such things. Talon lay inside a quiet recovery kennel with the door open, but a gate across the frame, not locked in so much as given a boundary. The German shepherd's coat had dried unevenly, leaving tufts along his neck, and the small notch in his right ear showed clearly beneath the soft morning light. He was awake. Of course he was awake. Talon watched the room with the tired authority of a commander who had been informed the war was over, but did not trust the paperwork. Agent Victor Madsen stood in Odette's office with Deputy Laurel Brigg, both of them surrounded by files sealed in clear bags. Madsen had arrived during the storm, looking like a man who had been built for bad roads and worse documents. Dark coat, calm eyes, black gloves, no wasted movement. He spoke softly, but every sentence seemed to have a form number attached to it. Garrett Fenn had been taken in for questioning before sunrise. Warren Pike had not left either. Neither man had been dragged into some grand public reckoning. There had been no dramatic confession under lightning, no speech shouted over the storm, no villain dissolving like smoke. Real accountability came with radios, signatures, interviews, receipts, chain of custody logs, and exhausted people who knew that the truth could still be lost if someone mislabeled a folder. Laurel stepped out of the office first, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Marcus looked at her. "Well?" She gave him the look she usually reserved for people who wanted easy answers. "Fenn's talking." "That surprise you?" "No, men like Fenn usually mistake panic for strategy." She glanced toward Odette's office, where Madsen was photographing another document. "He says he watched Elias's place. Not officially, not regularly, just enough to know when Talon moved. Says he made calls when the dog showed up here." "To Pike?" "To someone above Pike, maybe. He's naming names and trying to sound less guilty by sounding useful." Marcus looked toward Talon. The dog's eyes were half closed now, but one ear stayed turned toward the voices. Laurel continued. "Madsen says the papers link to more than one transfer point, different counties, possibly different states. This won't be finished today." Marcus nodded. He had not expected it to be, not anymore. When he was younger, he had wanted justice to be a hammer. Clean swing, loud strike, obvious result. Age had taught him justice was often more like snowmelt, slow, unglamorous, seeping through cracks until the ground finally changed. "Dogs?" he asked. "Bruno, Sable. June stay here under legal hold until Madsen clears safer placement." Laurel tucked her notebook into her coat. "Talon, too, unless—" She stopped. Marcus looked at her. "Unless what?" Laurel's mouth flattened. "Unless Odette and Naomi agree his best welfare placement is with a qualified temporary foster who already signed access papers and has proven he can follow instructions without turning the building into a personal legend." Marcus blinked once. That was almost a compliment. "Don't ruin it." Odette came out behind Laurel, holding a folder against her chest. Her face was pale with fatigue, but her eyes were clearer than they had been the night before. Grief still lived there. So did resolve. They had learned to share the room. "We don't have to decide right now," she said. Talon lifted his head at the sound of her voice. Marcus looked at the dog. "He decide anything?" Naomi appeared from the treatment room. "He decided to eat 4 bites while you were outside." Marcus turned to Talon. "4?" Talon looked back at him without remorse. "Show off." Naomi handed Marcus a shallow dish with warmed food and a spoon. "Sit near him, same way as before. No grand emotional breakthrough. If you make this sentimental, I'll chart it as a setback." Marcus took the dish. "You use threats like medicine. Correct dosage saves lives." He sat on the floor near Talon's open kennel, not blocking the exit. The gate stayed between them. Talon watched the dish, then Marcus, then the room beyond Marcus, as if confirming all exits were still where they belonged. "No ceremony," Marcus said. Talon's nose moved. He ate 1 bite from the spoon. Then another. Then, after a long pause in which every human in the room pretended not to witness the act, a third. Miles, from the hallway, whispered, "I am emotionally compromised." Naomi pointed the pen at him without looking. "Go inspect your kingdom." "Yes, doctor." Talon ate almost half the small portion. It was not a miracle. It was not a swelling orchestra moment where every wound received a ribbon and bowed. It was a hungry dog eating because a room had finally become safe enough to allow hunger back in. That was holier than music. By early afternoon, the legal arrangements took shape in the most unimpressive way possible. At Odette's old desk, beside a chipped mug, a half-dead pen, a stack of photocopies, and a printer that jammed twice before producing the correct forms. Marcus signed where Odette pointed. Temporary foster, medical follow-up, no transfer, no unauthorized contact, immediate return if welfare concerns arose, continued cooperation with the investigation, final adoption pending clearance. The pen sputtered halfway through his last signature. Miles rushed over with another. "Emergency pen," Marcus looked at it. "You have those?" "At Silver Pines, every pen is an emergency pen." Odette read through the final page, then set it down. "You understand this may still involve interviews," she said. Madsen may need statements. Laurel, too. I know. And Talon may be difficult at home. Marcus glanced at the German shepherd lying with his head near his paws, watching all of them like a skeptical landlord. I noticed. He startles at metal sounds, sleeps light, guards doors, doesn't like being rushed. Marcus said, Neither do I. Odette's expression softened. That was the moment that almost undid him. Not the rescue, not Garrett, not the note from Elias. Just that small recognition passing between two people too tired to lie well. Talon left Silver Pines at 3:40 in the afternoon. There was no fanfare, no adoption photo, no smiling post with balloons or cheerful captions. The storm had wrecked half the schedule, the investigation had swallowed the rest, and no one had energy for performance. Marcus opened the passenger door of his truck. Talon stood in the snow for a long moment, looking back at the shelter. Odette stood under the eave in her mustard parka, arms folded tight against the cold. Naomi hovered behind her, pretending not to hover. Miles raised one hand in a farewell salute that Talon ignored with majestic indifference. "Fair," Miles said. "We built our bond on mutual suspicion." Marcus waited. He did not tug the lead. After a while, Talon placed one front paw on the truck's running board, then the other. He climbed in stiffly, turned once, and settled in the passenger seat without looking at Marcus. Marcus shut the door. Odette approached his side of the truck. "He may not know how to be off duty," she said. Marcus looked through the windshield at Talon, who was already watching the driveway. "Then we'll start with shorter shifts." Odette nodded. "Call if anything changes." "I will." She seemed to want to say more. So did he. Both failed with equal dignity. Finally, Odette said, "My father used to write about dogs like they were better officers than people." Marcus's fingers tightened lightly on the doorframe. He was right, more than he was wrong. Odette gave a small, tired smile. "That sounds like him." Marcus climbed into the truck. The drive home was slow. Talon sat upright, eyes moving from tree line to road to mirrors. Once, when the chains bit hard into an icy rut, metal clanged beneath the truck, and Talon's body went rigid. Marcus did not reach for him. He only said, "Road noise." Talon remained stiff. "Bad road, bad truck, no bad guy." The dog's ears shifted. Marcus kept his voice level until Talon's breathing slowed. At the cabin, Talon did not bound out like a rescued dog in a cheerful movie. He stepped down carefully, stood in the snow, and studied the house. Marcus opened the front door and let him enter first. Talon moved room to room: kitchen, mudroom, hall, bedroom doorway, back door, window facing the trees. The inspection was thorough enough that Marcus felt mildly judged by his own security routine. At last, Talon chose a place near the iron stove, close enough for heat, angled so he could see the front door and part of the hallway. Marcus watched him lower himself onto the rug. "I used to think that was the best spot, too." Talon looked at him, a long, flat look. Marcus nodded. "Still is. I was being polite." The dog sighed and put his head down. Marcus laughed quietly. It startled him, not because it was loud. It was not. It was small and rusted and barely qualified. But it had arrived without asking permission from Grief First. That evening, Marcus called Caleb before Caleb could call him. His son answered on the second ring. "Dad?" "Yeah?" There was a pause. "You okay?" Marcus looked toward the stove. Talon lay beneath the table now, one ear still aimed at the door. "I got the wrong dog." Caleb was silent for 2 seconds. Then carefully, "Wrong bad or wrong perfect?" Marcus looked at the old German shepherd, the notched ear, the watchful eyes, the paws that had stood on a lead to keep another dog from slipping away. "Annoyingly perfect?" Caleb laughed. The sound came through the phone, bright and unguarded, traveling from Spokane across the snowy distance between them. It warmed the cabin in a way the stove could not. "You ate?" Caleb asked. Marcus looked at the pot on the stove. Soup again, possibly the same soup reborn in a darker form. "I'm working on it." "Dad, I invited someone to dinner." Another pause. This one was enormous. "Someone human?" Marcus glanced at Talon. "Mostly." "Dad?" "Odette Hale, manager at Silver Pines." "Oh?" There was more inside that single syllable than Marcus wanted to discuss. "It's not like that," Marcus said. "I didn't say anything." "You breathe something." "I breathe supportively." "Don't." "I'll breathe neutrally." Marcus almost smiled again. Too many smiles in one day. Dangerous pattern. When Odette arrived an hour later, the snow had finally slowed to a fine silver dust. Marcus had managed soup, bread, coffee, and only one minor incident involving a burned edge that he chose to call texture. Talon greeted Odette by standing, watching, then stepping aside enough to allow her in. For Talon, it was practically a parade. The dinner was simple: soup in plain bowls, bread slightly charred, black coffee strong enough to negotiate with the weather. Talon lay beneath the table and released one deep sigh after smelling the food. Odette looked down. "Was that about your cooking?" Marcus tore a piece of bread. "He's adjusting to civilian disappointment." She laughed. It was small, but it stayed in the room. For a while, they talked about safe things. Silver Pines repairs. Naomi's insistence that no dog be called Fine until medically proven fine. Miles's new title, which had already become longer and less useful. Laurel's talent for making silence feel like a legal document. Then the safe things ran out. The fire shifted in the stove. Outside, snow slipped from a branch and fell softly to the ground. Marcus set his spoon down. "Your father hated instant coffee," he said. Odette's face changed, not closed, bracing. Marcus looked at his hands, then forced himself to look at her. He said it tasted like somebody described coffee to a committee that had never been thirsty. Odette pressed one hand to her mouth, and a laugh broke through before the tears did. "That sounds like something he would write." "He cheated at cards badly," Marcus said. "Not successfully, just badly. He'd look guilty before he even drew." Odette's eyes shone. Marcus continued because stopping would be cowardice, and he had spent enough years dressing cowardice as privacy. He shared everything: candy, socks, batteries. Once gave away his last dry pair of gloves and then complained for 2 days like the suffering had been forced on him by Congress. Odette laughed again, and this time the tears slipped free. Marcus's voice roughened. In the last seconds, he didn't make a speech. People like to imagine speeches. There wasn't time. He saw what was happening before I did. He pushed me down and yelled my name like he was mad at me for not saving myself fast enough. The room grew very still. Talon raised his head beneath the table. Marcus swallowed once. "I lived because he moved first." Odette looked at him through tears, but she did not break. She seemed, somehow, to become more herself under the grief, as if each truth, however painful, gave back one small piece of her father that the final report had never held. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "I should have told you years ago." "You didn't know me." "I knew enough." She did not argue. That mercy hurt. He leaned back, staring at the fire. "I can't give you a clean version of him. He was funny, stubborn, brave, irritating, generous, and terrible at hiding candy. That's what I have." Odette wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "That's more than a clean version." Under the table, Talon shifted and placed his head on Marcus's boot. Not heavily. Enough. Odette saw it. "So," she said softly, "he shares watches now?" Marcus looked down at the dog. "Apparently under protest." Talon sighed again, as if confirming the terms were unfavorable. They sat a long time after the bowls were empty. No one tried to turn the evening into closure. Closure was a word people used when they wanted grief to behave. This was not closure. It was dinner. It was firelight. It was a daughter hearing her father's laugh through another man's damaged memory. It was a dog under the table holding two survivors in the same room. That was enough for one night. The next morning, the snow stopped. Sunlight came slowly over the pines, cold and pale, turning every branch outside Marcus's cabin into silver bone. The world looked newly made, though Marcus knew it was the same world. Same locks, same old floorboards, same sudden tightness in his chest when a branch cracked somewhere in the timber. He still checked the front door, then the back, then the window facing the trees. The habits did not disappear because Talon had come home. Wounds did not kneel and surrender after one good night. Marcus still flinched when the stovepipe popped. He still listened too hard to silence. He still carried Helmund in places no one could see. But when he opened the door, Talon stepped out onto the porch and into the fresh snow. The German shepherd paused at the top step. His breath lifted in a pale cloud. His notched ear pointed toward the trees. Then he moved down into the yard, leaving the first clear paw prints across the white. After several steps, Talon looked back, not commanding, not pleading, checking. Marcus stood in the doorway with one hand on the frame. For years he had lived like a shadow behind glass, able to see the world but not quite enter it. The cabin had been his fort, his apology, his hiding place. Now a dog with a damaged record and a stubborn heart was waiting in the snow as if the morning had somewhere to go. Marcus stepped out. The cold took his breath, but gently. Talon turned forward again, and Marcus followed him into the white. Slowly, still hurting, still watchful, but no longer alone. In the end, Marcus did not find peace because the past disappeared. He found it because one snowy morning he chose to open the door anyway. Talon was not a miracle that erased every scar. He was a quiet reminder that even wounded hearts can still guard, still trust, and still learn to walk forward. Sometimes grace does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes as a tired dog resting his head on your boot, asking you to take one more step into the light. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what Talon and Marcus reminded you of in your own life, and if you believe stories like this still matter, please like and subscribe to help us keep telling them. May your home be warm, your heart be steady, and may God give you peace for the road ahead.